Welcome back, everyone. Now we're going to talk about the future of money, and there's nobody better to talk about the future of money than Mike Vaughan. He was one of the very first employees of Venmo in Philadelphia in 2009. That startup now processes over $10 billion a quarter in payments and has 450 employees. Please welcome to the stage Mike Vaughan.
All right. So I wanted to, I'll talk for a few minutes. We have about 20 minutes, so I'll talk for 10, 12 minutes. And often when I do these, there are a lot of questions, so I wanted to make sure there's time for questions at the end. So if you guys have questions, prepare your questions, and I think there's some microphones out there. We can do questions at the end. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, where do these ideas come from? 5, 6, 7 years ago, if I came and talked about Venmo, nobody had ever heard of it. And all the great ideas that are out there, a lot of them start with really small, simple ideas. When you think about some of the best apps in the world, the best businesses, the best companies in the world, they started with some simple, small idea that had the potential to change the world, but that focused small idea is where it all started. So you think about things like Uber, and when they were getting going, the idea was, how do you make transportation as reliable and as available as running water? And in some cases, they've done that now, where it's more reliable than running water. You think about a company, an old school company like Disney. They wanted to make people happy. So they didn't set out to build amusement parks. They built out to create happiness and make people happy. Steve Jobs, when he invented the iPod, he wanted to put all the music that you own in your pocket. He wasn't thinking about disk space and hard drives and speed of processors. He wanted to solve one simple concept, was how do we get rid of the Discman or the tape deck and put all the music that you own in your pocket? Venmo was the same kind of thing. The two founders of Venmo sat there and said, why is sending money any more difficult or any harder than sending a text message? How do we make sending money as easy as sending a text message? And that's sort of where it all started. So I want to start with that premise and take you back to sort of, a lot of people ask me, how did Venmo get going? Where did it come from? What was the founding story? So it started with two guys, Ikram and Cortina. They kind of go by, they're like Madonna. They go by one name each. Ikram and Cortina. I'd worked with Ikram at a previous company, and while he was working at that company, sort of on the side, he started working on something with his friend. He was a musician, and one of the things he was trying to solve is, if you're a big name musician, you have merchandise, you have a way to sell things, they were trying to figure out how if you have a show and you have people who are fans, how do you make it easier for them to buy music from you, download your songs? At the time it was MP3 songs. How do you buy merchandise? So they invented this idea of maybe we could do that in a way where you could send money via text to the musician. So this is going on, they're working on this on the side. Ikram goes to New York to visit Cortina for a weekend, forgets his wallet, and as Ikram often does, is he left his wallet at home. Cortina had to cover him for the weekend. At the end of the weekend, they said, why is it so hard? He doesn't have a checkbook. He doesn't have any cash on him. They didn't use PayPal at the time. And he's sitting there thinking, well, if we're trying to solve this problem for musicians, maybe we should just solve it for everybody. How do we make this so that if I can text you about like, hey, Cortina, do you want to go grab lunch? Why can't I just say, hey, here's the $10 for lunch that we had earlier, and it's as easy as sending a text message. So that's where it all started. If you go back to, so I joined Venmo in 2011. I saw Gil Beto was here earlier, and I think he's judging or announcing the startup competition later. He was one of the investors we pitched. We pitched hundreds of investors. Not many of them got it. At the time, they were pitching this idea, and literally, if I had slides, which I don't, Ikram's pitch deck, going and asking for $5 million from an investor, was basically, here's this app we built, and here's a stick drawing, literally a stick figure drawing of how it worked. And what they really were latched onto was, this is dead simple. Sending money is really hard, it's really expensive, it's really delayed in terms of how fast it works. But sending a text message, I pull up my phone, I look up Mike, and I send him a text message. We want to make sending money like that. And that was the underlying premise of what they were doing. We didn't get a lot of investors hooked. We had one, that's all it takes, and then it sort of begat a bunch of others. And it really all hinged on that one concept. And as a little side story, people always ask me, where did the name Venmo come from? And they had 4 fundamental criteria. As they were brainstorming ideas, Venmo actually comes from sort of what we're doing, Ven to sell and Mo for mobile. So it's a little bit originated in kind of the business we're in. But the criteria was it had to be 5 or 6 letters, so they wanted it short. They didn't want it to be a misspelling. Everybody who's a startup now can't afford the domain name, so they misspell it and put a bunch of consonants together. They didn't want that. And they wanted it to become a verb. So they were specifically trying to find something. They knew this could be something that it was involved in people's day-to-day lives. They wanted a word that could become a verb. And most importantly, it had to be available on GoDaddy for $19.95. So Venmo.com was available, and now Venmo is a verb. People often ask me, well, what clicked? What changed? So back in the early days, you sort of have that grind of how do we get more users? How do we grow? How do we get people sticking with the platform? And it wasn't any single specific point, but there's sort of a building effect of once you start to hit that critical mass and people trust the platform, and there's this aspect on Venmo of users on Venmo have selfish reasons for getting other people onto Venmo, is it just makes Venmo more useful. And so we had this natural sort of viral effect. And one of the interesting things was in 2014, there was a research report that came out about the mobile P2P payments market. And so it was a really sort of, they were putting a stake in the ground and they said, there's an independent research company said by 2019, there will be $17 billion in mobile P2P payments in the US. So this was 2014. They were basically saying in 5 years' time, in 2019, there will be $17 billion in payments, in mobile payments, P2P payments in the US. In 2017, Venmo on its own did $35 billion in mobile payments in the US. So we basically doubled what they said the entire industry was going to do, and we did it 3 years after the fact, not 5 years later. So basically what we were facing in those early days was an entire industry that didn't understand that there was a need here, or there was something wrong, and there was something broken, or there was a problem that they were trying to solve. They were trying to invent tap to pay and NFC codes and all these QR codes and NFC and all these other ways to pay in store and do these other things. But what they were missing was fundamental, very simple things that needed to be solved. Similar to what problem Uber solved, similar to what problem Apple has solved in many occasions. Venmo set out to solve one very simple thing that no one else saw, which was it's way too hard, way too timely, and way too expensive to send money. And how do we do that in an easier way? And so just to give context, so that's $35 billion in payments, P2P payments in the US alone last year, just over Venmo. Q4 of last year, Q4 2017, we did over $10 billion in payments, and that's growing at 97% year over year. So these are big numbers that are continuing to almost double year after year, and it continues to grow. So we talk a lot about no one saw it coming. 5 years ago, if I was here, no one would have heard of Venmo. No one would be a user. It'd be one person in the crowd. How many people out there now have heard of Venmo or used Venmo? That's pretty good. So if I asked that question in 2012, it would be like 2, and it would be like Ikram's best friend and his roommate, and that's about it. And so we've come a long way. And people ask, well, how did that all happen? I think one is we had to create this trust factor. People had to get used to using their phone to pay for things. Putting their bank credentials, putting their credit card into the phone was a big step. And we had to get that trust. One of the things that Venmo leveraged was, because it's this friend-to-friend network, and this was intentional, was, well, if my friends use Venmo, then I'm okay with it. So the barrier to get over in terms of earning trust was a lot lower, because once you had their friends and their friends were recruiting them onto Venmo, it gave them that immediate trust factor of, well, if you use it and you've had no problems with it, it's sort of like when your friends tell you, hey, there's this great new restaurant. You don't go look on Yelp to see if you like that it has good reviews. You know that you like the same kind of food your friend does. They give you good recommendations. You're just going to go eat at that restaurant. So we had that built into it. And like I mentioned earlier, we had this sort of selfish aspect to it, which was people who use Venmo, it's a lot more useful. If I have 2 friends on Venmo, I can use it once every few months. If I have 50 friends on Venmo, I can use it a lot more often. So people had sort of a selfish incentive to get their friends onto Venmo. And the key is, and sort of the headline of what we're talking about, the future of money, is it's all about the experience. So we took something that historically had been sort of fraught with delays and expenses and cumbersome experience, whether it's writing checks or going to the ATM to get cash and paying fees and all of these extra sort of layers of why can't I just pay you back? And we really focused on the experience, and we pushed all of that other stuff to the background. And one of the interesting parts about all this is we didn't really invent anything. We just focused on the experience. We took all of the same banking infrastructure, all the same money movement systems, and all of the same back-end stuff that PayPal had, that all the banks have, that everybody else has, and we just made it a better experience. And the key there was really focusing on that one concept of how do we make sending money as easy as sending a text message. And the customer doesn't care how hard that is. They just want you to fix it for them. And they don't want to hear that, oh, we can't make it easy or fast because it's not easy or fast for us. They want you to just take care of it. And that's what we did that I think sort of changed the game. And now what you're seeing is everybody else is coming along and saying, wow, that actually is possible. And it all starts with sort of focusing on the experience. The other aspect of that is we didn't put Venmo up front. We wanted the users to sort of define Venmo for us. And so we made Venmo a platform that allowed the users to sort of carry us forward of how are people going to use it. We had an interesting sort of turn of events with I don't know if any of you watched The Bachelor, but this season of The Bachelor, the guy who was the bachelor had asked one of the girls to marry him and then decided he wanted to have the other girl marry him. So he broke up with the first one on national TV. And I don't know why they chose to do that, but it was for ratings on national TV. And something that happened there that you would never script, that we would have never thought of, in the middle of the show while it's airing, all of a sudden people start paying the woman who had her heart broken on national TV, started getting a flood of Venmo payments. Go get a bottle of wine, he's a jerk, I'm with you, whatever. So this is something that, like, what marketing department comes up with something like this? And the cool part about this was Venmo created a platform for people to get connected and discover each other and connect with each other. And in this case, they don't even know each other. And in a way where the money wasn't really the point. Did they send her money? Yeah, they sent her $5 or $6 for a glass of wine, or $10 or $50 or whatever it was. But the point was the sentiment and the emotion. And so we pushed that money to the background and really focused on the experience. Venmo just took a back seat to all that and allowed that to happen. And it all started with that premise of focus on the experience and make something possible with these connections and the social aspect, and move the money to the background, ensure there's money moving. And in this case, she actually received several $1,000s. ABC ended up matching it, and they donated $5,000 or $6,000 to charity as a result of Venmo being a platform where people can connect. What's next for Venmo? We want to bring Venmo to places, so we don't want to tell people how to use Venmo. We want to bring it to where people will find value out of it, and that's what we talk a lot about is how do we create opportunities for people to use Venmo in ways that will add value? And so we're doing things like, well, not only do we want more people on Venmo, but we want more ways for people to use Venmo. So we're introducing ways for you to use Venmo with commerce, where we've integrated Venmo as a way to pay inside of other apps. So you may have seen things where we just launched with Grubhub and Seamless and Eat24 and that family of apps where you now can use Venmo similar to just a simple one-tap connect. When you want to sign up for Grubhub, instead of typing in on your phone your credit card number and expiration date, you authenticate through Venmo, and it's one tap and back, and this seamless integration with Seamless as well. We've launched with Williams-Sonoma brands across all of their brands in their mobile web experience, where you can use Venmo to chip in on, let's say, a registry gift for somebody who's getting married, so things like that. And we're also, we've recently tested in beta and are going to launch full public launch later this year of a Venmo card, where you can use your balance on Venmo to use anywhere that a MasterCard's accepted. And so you're starting to create ways where people get the value of Venmo and that experience And we're not trying to tell people change your behavior, like you need to tap to pay instead of swiping a card. We're basically saying, hey, if you want to swipe a card, we want to bring Venmo to you and create that experience. And so, I'll wrap up here, open up to questions, and I'll leave you with one thing, and this is sort of the headline of the talk is, the future of money is not about the money. The money is a vehicle for something that's going on, which is an experience, whether that's a birthday or roommates or going out for drinks or buying something. There's some experience going on that should be at the forefront. We focus on that experience and good things happen, push the money and the nuts and bolts of everything to the background and make the customer experience the forefront, and good things will happen. So with that, I'll open it up to questions. I think there's mics.
So first of all, you guys have a great application, so thank you for developing it. I'm curious in terms of what is your business model? How does Venmo make money?
That's a great question. So Venmo is on a path that, weirdly, a lot of startups pivot and turn left and right, and Venmo, in a weird way, is on the exact same path it's been on since day one. When we raised money privately, we got acquired by Braintree in 2012, and then collectively got acquired, Braintree and Venmo got acquired by PayPal in 2013. And a big part of what we were building was, think about our P2P, our peer-to-peer platform as customer acquisition. We needed to train people and teach them that their phone was an okay place to use, to conduct payments. And so we created that opportunity where we get that trust, we get that user base, and we're now doing things like the Venmo card, connect with merchants, and the revenue is similar to the PayPal business model. You have merchant fees and processing fees on the other side of that enable sort of the longer term business model. So what got us to this point is really sort of acquisition and creating this user base to then take that demand. And it's not all that different than how PayPal started on the web, honestly. When you go back to the late 90s, early 2000s, that's a lot of how PayPal got started. Started with P2P. They caught lightning in a bottle with eBay, obviously, but then beyond that, it was a very similar sort of trajectory. We just really focused on the mobile side of it and have a similar path.
Have hackers caused you a challenge? And if so, to what extent?
So security is the most important thing to us. So like I said before, it's easy for us to get the trust because most people join Venmo because their friends were on Venmo, but it's a lot easier to lose it. So security, privacy, protecting our users, both their information, obviously their financial, their finances that they're holding with us. So we have a sort of, an obligation that is far higher than most apps when you're talking about, a mobile financial app. And that's just number one. It's a non-starter. It's everything else comes second after that. And so, yes, there's always things coming at you. The bigger you get, the harder that is because you become a bigger target. But it's just number one thing we do all day long. Nothing else matters without having that first. And so it's just present in everything that we do.
Hi. My question is, what makes Venmo different from Square?
So there are other apps out there that are doing P2P, and I think that's one of the things that's interesting is 5 or 6 years ago, nobody wanted to touch it, and PayPal honestly had lost track of it. And I think what you're seeing now is people ask us, why does PayPal and Venmo exist inside the same company? And we have a similar product offering. I think it's really what experience do you want? For Venmo, there's a social aspect to it. Not all people want that social piece, and they use Venmo for other reasons. Venmo has a massively growing user base that creates a network. And the things we're doing with Braintree and PayPal on the merchant side are not possible in other places. So you can't do something with some of these other apps where you have this experience like what we just launched with Grubhub, where you have this seamless experience where you tie together, hey, I bought dinner on Grubhub or Seamless and it delivered, and I have 4 roommates, and then I can use that right in that same Venmo experience and split and share with my friends. and the whole mobile aspect of it. So we think we have some advantages there. But at the same time, when all these companies are doing it, honestly, it just raises awareness about, hey, mobile payments is okay, right? And consumers are growing a lot more trustful of the entire ecosystem, which I think in general is a good thing.
Thanks.
Hi, Caroline De Posada. Are you planning to integrate with QuickBooks, like PayPal is doing it now, where you integrate as a bank with QuickBooks so that you can download their transactions?
Right now, we're sort of focused on Venmo and this merchant experience. We do have the ability to sort of download. We're pretty focused on staying dead simple. That's one of the things we've done. The downside of that, or the flip side of that, is there's a lot of things we could do that people want that we probably won't do, or we may not do this year or next year. And I think that's just one of those trade-offs. Is one of the things we've done really well is stay very focused on what we do. And I think part of that is what makes people really enjoy the Venmo experiences is how dead simple it is. So short answer is right now that's not on our plans, but those kinds of things are always things that we're looking at to do to make it a better experience. But if we're going to err in any direction, it's stay simpler and do less and get what we're doing really, do it really well.
Thank you.
So this says all zeros, so I don't know who's going to cut us off, but I'll take more questions.
Works for me.
So there's a lot of chat here about cryptocurrencies and decentralized money. Venmo's pretty interesting because it deals with the digital version of like government-issued fiat currency. What are your guys' thoughts on like physical cash and sort of like where that's headed and the potential ramifications of bringing that completely digital?
This is one of those things that we want to be wherever our users and consumers want to be. And so like we're issuing a card against your Venmo balance, and it confuses a lot of people. Like, wait a second, I thought Venmo was like anti-cash, anti-card, and digitizing everything. And the reality is a lot of people still swipe their card and want to use a card, or now they stick it in the chip thing. But we're not here to tell people stop using your card or stop using cash. So I think our challenge is, and our job as Venmo is, how do we bring Venmo to those experiences, right? And we're not going to bet on a certain physical technology. People ask, are you guys going to get into the blockchain and Bitcoin stuff? And the way we look at all of it, from cash to the cryptocurrencies and everything in between, is where we think our users will get value out of us bringing Venmo to that experience. That's where we're going to focus. So card is a good example where some people would look at it and say we're going backwards. We actually think it's a step forward where we're sort of bringing the whole thing together in a more, sort of engaging and delightful way.
Hello. Kind of the role on the card. If you had to say it was a bigger influencer for you guys to release a card, was it because of competitors like Cash App who've had a card to offer to the clients? Or because, like you're saying, you want to offer more of the experience?
Certainly we look at what others are doing. We had that in the works. They came out with one before we got ours to market. But we do we kind of look at what competitors are doing. Instant transfer to bank is another one where we were planning that. Some others got to market before we did. What we brought to market we think is better than everything else out there. You can now instantly transfer out of Venmo to your bank for a quarter, for any amount, which is by far PayPal as well. On PayPal and Venmo, by far the cheapest way to get instant transfer of any of the non-bank offerings. The banks have an unfair advantage in that they are the banks. They have lower costs. But so we really are focused on what do we want to do and what do we think is most important to Venmo. So I'd say we always are aware of that stuff happening, but rarely are we reacting immediately to something else somebody's doing. So if you see us doing it, it's because we've been planning it. We wouldn't sit there and say, oh my gosh, we never saw that coming. If we did, we're certainly nimble enough to react to it. But in most cases, big things like that, we've probably had it in the works, and it's just a matter of prioritization and timing.
Hi, are you planning to expand your services to Latin America perhaps? And if so, what challenges you think you could face?
Yeah, so the big question for us is when's the right time to do it, right? It's not really an if, and this has been true for years, honestly. And the thing we're trying to figure out is is we want to have some of this other commerce stuff more fully baked. And so a lot of the stuff we're doing on the merchant side in other apps and with PayPal merchants where you can use Venmo in most places where you see a PayPal button in the card, we don't want to go into new markets with a partial offering like we did in the US. We started with P2P, and then over several years we had to build to this point. And so I think that's really the key for us. And it's really a question of what's the right point. Sometimes you can get there too early, sometimes you can get there too late. Right now for us, the focus is the US, but clearly, with the partnership with PayPal, being part of PayPal, they give us reach and expansion capabilities that would be a lot harder to do if we were on our own. When you think about currencies and local markets and all the regulatory stuff that go around getting into local markets, and having a presence there with Braintree and PayPal is clearly one of the benefits we have of being part of the company, and something that we'll leverage down the road. Thank you. All right, I think that's our sign. Does that mean we get off?
That's it.
All right, thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, Mike. Great.